economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
If you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. Confuse you.
My definition of white supremacy and racism, I use those two terms as synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system announcing the commencement of the annual purge sanctioned by the U.S. government. Weapons of Class 4 and lower have been authorized for use during the purge. All other weapons are restricted. Government officials of ranking 10 have been granted immunity from the purge and shall not be harmed. Commencing at the siren, any and all crime, including murder, will be legal for 12 continuous hours. Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable until tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. when the purge concludes. Blessed be our new founding fathers and America, a nation reborn. May God be with you all.
Summer is upon us, and so it's time for our regular summer reading series. Now, often when we think of books for this season, we think about beach-friendly novels full of adventure and romance. But since this year marks the 50th anniversary of many pivotal events in the civil rights movement, so-called Freedom Summer, we decided to dive into books that explore the theme of freedom. And we're going to start with one of the cornerstones of the movement, Nonviolent Resistance. You will have seen this in countless old news clips and even depicted in movies like The Butler. You'll have seen activists courageously withstanding abuse by fellow citizens and law enforcement. But what you did not see and might not have known about until now is that passive resistance in public protest did not necessarily mean an unwillingness to use force to protect themselves from violence in other circumstances. This hiding in plain sight story is recounted by the author, Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr. in his new book, This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed, How Guns Made the Civil Rights Movement Possible. And Professor Cobb is with us now. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
What gave you the idea for this book? Or for this history, really, to kind of dig into this?
Well, as a writer, I'm very much concerned with how the history of the Southern freedom movement or civil rights movement is portrayed. And I'm very conscious of the gaps in the history. And one important gap in the history, in the portrayal of the movement, is the role of guns in the movement. I worked in the South. I lived with families in the South. There was never a family I stayed with that didn't have a gun. I know from personal experience and the experiences of others that guns kept people alive, kept communities safe, and all you have to do to understand this is simply think of black people as human beings, and they're going to respond to terrorism the way anybody else would.
Now, early in the book, you start off explaining how guns became an important part of Southern culture. The fact is that during this era of kind of intense repression, blacks were specifically forbidden from having guns previously, and those were among the things that they sought to acquire. How is that important, or why did that become important?
Well, first, I would say that right from the beginning of the country's history, going all the way back, say, to the Jamestown colony in the 17th century and the days of slavery, guns and weapons were forbidden to black people. I mean, weapons, for obvious reasons, are associated with rebellion, and one of the big fears in the South was slave rebellion. After the Civil War, you had all these black soldiers who had fought in the Union Army coming back home with weapons. So states, particularly in what's called the First Reconstruction, attempted to disarm blacks. And that was not all that successful. You see, if we were really doing a deep look at this period, say between the end of the Civil War and the start of World War I, you'd see instance after instance of blacks in the rural South fending off the Ku Klux Klan and others with weapons. It's the period what historian Vincent Harding, who just passed away, called the period of great black protest.
You are now listening to P.A.R. People Activity Radio, and I'm your host, JohnGHorse. Welcome. You have found your family in a peaceful place. PAR aims to be a family-friendly information distribution program seeking to inform non-white people, in particular black classifieds, and assist them in counter-racist codification. The title of today's show is The 1946 Columbia, Tennessee Race Riot and the Myth of Black American Cowardice. Yes, indeed. Now, I could be in error, and maybe this is just my personal experience, but I find when I have discussions with other people who are classified as black, sometimes one-on-one discussions, sometimes groups discussions, sometimes family discussions, but nevertheless discussions with people who are classified as black. When discussing the system of racism and white supremacy and our relation to that system as people classified as black, meaning that we are perpetual victims, design victims, creatures that, for the most part, feeds the system of racism, white supremacy. I always hear one moniker, one slogan, a conclusion that is came to almost 95% of the time, and that conclusion is, if indeed we are victims of a system called racism, white supremacy, and these are black people's responses, black people who I have interacted with, there is no data, there is no factual claim to what I'm saying. I'm just speaking on my personal experience, but I find that when discussing racism and white supremacy, people that are classified as black respond in one way. They start to say that, well, if we are victims of the system of racism and white supremacy and we're classified as black, why haven't we fought back? Why haven't we rebelled? Why haven't we stepped to the people who dominate us, who classify themselves as white, and fixed our situation for our best interest? And I always, not every time, but most of the time, respond in the same manner. From my research, there has never been any point of European conquest, of colonialism, or racism, white supremacy, where people whom are classified as black hasn't practiced counter-racist violence. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Nowhere on the planet where you find black people in the Pacific, where you find people who are classified as black in Asia, where you will find people who are classified as black in Africa, where you will find people who are classified as black in the Caribbean, where you will find people who are classified as black in the Americas. Never in the history of white domination and white terror domination have people who are classified as black, and I might add, people who are classified as black worldwide are the origine of the landmass wherever you find us. You have never seen a wholesale submission by people who are classified as black. As a matter of fact, as it pertains to the United States history, people who are classified as black, American post-colonial history, people who are classified as black are the sole practitioners of counter-racist violence, still to this day. When I'm talking about counter-racist violence, I am talking about counter-racist violence in response to white terror domination by people who are classified as white. That being said, that's my position and that's my experience. But in response to the large numbers of people who are classified as black that I believe have accepted this myth of Black American cowardice, I will be conducting a series of episodes dedicated to the ancestors who are classified as black, who practice counter-racist violence, or as the political correct term, they practice liberty or death. Because we should not be misinformed on the realities of what our ancestors practiced in order for us to be able to be here today to put in our work to figure out how to solve the problem of racism and white supremacy. Now, the previous clip that I played before I start talking was an interview by Charles Cobb, who wrote the book That Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed. He was talking about gun ownership. The next clip will be Emory University Associate Professor of African American Studies, Carol Anderson, breaking down the historical information on the 1946 Columbia race riots. Cue the clip.
In 1946, the race riot in Columbia, Tennessee was a phenomenon that begins to speak to the militancy of black veterans and the black community coming out of that Second World War. What happened is, and many of these things start off as something really simple. What happened was a woman named Gladys Stevenson, a black woman, wanted to get her radio repaired. She took it to a shop. The guy told her it was going to cost so much to get it fixed, and it would be done by such and such a date. She goes back to pick it up. He tells her it's going to cost more. She's like, I don't have that kind of money. He's like, yeah, it bees that way sometimes. And so they go back and forth. Then he sells her radio, and then he tells her it's going to cost more for her to get it back from the guy that he just sold it to. Next time she comes in with her son, who's a Navy veteran, because when she gets the radio, it doesn't work. He's cut off the electric cord and the batteries don't work. And he's charged her double the price that he originally said it was going to cost. They get into a heated argument. In this heated argument, it looks like one of the assistants is getting ready to smack the woman. And this veteran, let me be real clear, this veteran used to box. This veteran was not going to let somebody smack his mother, and he steps in between. And the fact that you have a black man in Tennessee in 1946 basically stepping up saying, oh no, you are not going to lay your hands on my mother. Come on, Mom, let's go. And so she's walking out. The son is walking out. The man is so angry, he bam, and he hits the veteran in the back of the head. Now, veteran doesn't go down. Veteran turns around and it's like, oh, snap, bam, and the battle is on. He's pounding him, pounding him, pounding him. They go through a glass window. This is 1946. You get a black man hitting a white man, going through a glass window. As they go through the glass window of the radio shop, whites are around looking, going, what is this? What is this? And so a few more whites go in there to try to beat on the veteran because, I'm like, my God, you've got a black man hitting a white man. This is absolutely criminal. Well, when the mother sees folks attacking her son, she's like, oh, that's my baby boy. That's my baby boy. She comes after him she picks up one of those shards of glass and she starts slashing. They both get pounded. They both get arrested. And the lynch mob is like, oh, we're going to have to do something here. You know, these folks have gotten a little too uppity. Who do they think they are? Talking back and hit. Did you see what they did to poor Bo over there? Oh, that unacceptable. And you start getting this milling around of the crowd around the jail. Well, the black community sees the milling around, starts hearing the word, we're going to get a rope, we're going to get a rope, we're going to get a rope. And they start moving. They work to get the son and the mother out of Columbia, Tennessee. The lynch mob is coming. Black folks start organizing. Because one of the things, we think of like Martin Luther King and nonviolence, but one of the things is that there has been a tradition in the black community of self-defense. And so what they do is they get their shotguns, because remember, this is the South, everybody's got a gun. They get their shotguns, they get their rifles, they get their pistols, and they start taking up purchase on top of the buildings in the black community, the area known as the Bottoms or Mink Slide. And so as whites start pouring in, and there was one guy, he was just going to burn down the black businesses. So remind you of Tulsa, going to burn down the black businesses. And he comes in there with his buddies and a can of gasoline, and he starts trying to zigzag and pour the gasoline. And all of a sudden, the black guys on top of the roof start shooting. Bam! Bam! It's like, did black folks just shoot at white folks? Did we just get shot? Wait a minute. I'm wounded. I just got shot. What? So the wounded whites get pulled out, and it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And the crowd is coming. Now the sheriff is first in there going, okay, boys, now you just need to settle down. We'll handle this. And the crowd is like, no. Call in the Tennessee National Guard. The Tennessee State Guard. As they're coming in, as more whites of the mob are coming in, black folks are defending their property because there had been lynchings in that county before. They knew what this looked like. And this is 1946. You had veterans up on those roofs. They had taken down the Nazis. They weren't having it. For them, this was a new day. And even though they had been systematically cut out of the GI Bill, and part of that, let me describe that piece, being cut out of the GI Bill. It was passed in 1944, and it opened up a range of opportunities to veterans. It opened up housing opportunities, so through the VA loans. It opened up education, so a full ride through college for veterans. But the way that the law was written was that although it's a federal law and it's written race neutral, in the language is that it'll be administered by the states. And so when you're looking at these Jim Crow states that cannot fathom that a black man should have access to education, what you're getting are these veterans who are watching these opportunities pass them by. And the thing that they're going to do at the bare minimum is to protect their homestead, to protect their community, and to protect one of theirs. And so as whites are coming in, these veterans are shooting back. So when the sun comes up, the state troopers move in. And I mean, they moved in with machine guns. moved in and started rounding up. They call it, you were brave last night. Are you brave this morning? Because we're getting ready to take you down. At the very end, you get beatings, shootings. About 25 African Americans are arrested for attempted murder. Now, I see self-defense. What Tennessee saw was attempted murder for shooting at the guys who were trying to burn down the black neighborhood, for shooting at the mob that is trying to go in and destroy the black neighborhood. Well, these Tennessee stormtroopers basically did that as they went rummaging through the black business section, looking for the guns, looking for the rifles. Well, they weren't finding too much. And none of the ballistics were matching up. But in the trial that happened, I mean, the trial itself becomes fascinating, because as the lynch mob is forming and as it's very clear that the bullets are flying, somebody calls into Nashville and says, alert the NAACP, we're in trouble down here. The NAACP then sends its attorneys to help these 25 black men who have now been arrested for attempted murder, charged, indicted for attempted murder. The defense was absolutely brilliant. I mean, brilliant. Z. Alexander Luby, who was the black attorney out of Nashville, one of the first things he did was to begin to challenge the jury. You know, what they call that voir dire process, where it's like, do you have any biases against black folks? Do you really think that you can be fair and impartial? No. Next. Do you really? Next. Are you a member of the Klan? Well, yeah. Next. I mean, and so to find them, you can't make this stuff up. So by the time they were able to get 12 jurors who could be impartial, and then because the state's case was so weak, they didn't have the evidence. And Z. Alexander Luby is arguing, this is self-defense. This is one of the basic rights that we know of as Americans. We honor this, we cherish this. In the first round, 23 of the 25 men were found not guilty. Yeah. Now you had the other two. Thurgood Marshall, from the head office of the NAACP, comes down to take part in this case for the final two. They, again, laid out a brilliant, beautiful strategy. It so infuriated the law enforcement folks in Columbia, Tennessee, that what they did was, after the end of the trial, Z. Alexander Luby, Thurgood Marshall, who would become the first black Supreme Court Justice of the United States, and two other men are in a car, and they're leaving Columbia. And they're like, whew, man, that was, almost like, yeah, that was bad. Yeah, okay, this is good. Cops pull them over. Well, they think it was the cops because they were in plain clothes, and the cars were unmarked. But when you get that kind of, they're close behind you, so they pulled over. First thing they did was they're looking in the car for open containers, convinced that somebody's been drinking. They went and bought some Coca-Cola at the local store, but they weren't drinking hard liquor. There's no booze in the car. So cops were like, get in the car. Oh, man, didn't find any moonshine, didn't find any wine, didn't find any whiskey. They drive a little bit further. Cops pull them over again. Let's see your license. They ask Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall hands over his license. Man, it's not expired. There's nothing wrong with this license. Man, there's nothing we can get him on. He gets his license back and drives a little bit further. Then cops pull him over a third time. In this third time, they're like, you're driving drunk. It's like, I've had some water and I've had some Coca-Cola. Yeah, you look drunk to me. Get out of the car. They pull Thurgood Marshall out of the car, throw him into their car. Now, there's a white guy in the car named Harry Raymond. And he looks up and he's like, wait a minute. they're not going back to the city to arraign him or to arrest him or anything like that. They're driving off into the woods. So he hops over and he starts following the cars that have Thurgood Marshall in them. They look up, they turn right, he turns right. They turn left, he turns left. They slow down, he slows down. They speed up, he speeds up. And he's thinking, they're going to lynch him. They're taking him off into the woods to lynch him. They're going to lynch Thurgood Marshall. My God, they can lynch Thurgood Marshall. Finally, they turn this way, he turns this way. They stop the car. He stops the car. He gets up, and they're like, what are you doing? Cops are, what are you doing? And he's like, I know what you're planning, and I'm not going to let you do it. They said, what? What? He said, I know what you're planning. And you begin to think about this. You really have no backup. I mean, you are out here in the woods in Tennessee. You are dealing with men who are strapped. They have guns. You don't. This is nothing but the sheer, raw courage of principle and doing what I'm not going to let you do it. They're like, fine. Here. When they tried to then get Thurgood arraigned for, so they don't actually turn him over, they turn back around and go to the city. And then they try to arrest him for drunk driving. Judge looks at him and said, this man's not true. Come on, y'all. Dismissed, let him go. But in that one moment, you in fact see so much about the role of law enforcement in the South that doesn't enforce the law. Another strain of law enforcement is like, come on, y'all. There's some element of the Constitution we have to uphold. So you're looking at this really contested terrain, and in the middle of this contested terrain, you have African Americans who refuse to go into their place, who refuse to just stand there and take it, and who refuse to just abide by the old ways because they're like, no, this is a new day. And it's that new day that I think really is emblematic of the race riot in Columbia, Tennessee.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. A new day, quote unquote, a new day. And again, that was Emory University's Associate Professor of African American Studies, Carol Anderson, giving the brief summary of the 1946 race riots of Columbia, Tennessee. And I must make my correction. I do not agree with the term race riot. It does not accurately describe what takes place, what had taken place all over the nation. These were not riots. These were attempted ethnic cleansings, attempted anti-black massacres that ran into counter-racist action. Are you following what I'm saying? Counter-racist violence. They came up across brothers and sisters that was ready to get liberty or die. I mean, this is what it was. There wasn't no way around it. And it still ain't no way around it if you want to be honest about it here in current times, 2020. Liberty or death. You understand me? Now see, there's something extremely interesting about her description. It was almost a summary because she's a historian, and I understand if she's a historian, she knows the small details. And I give her credit for giving a colorful description of her knowledge of what's taking place. And in her defense, when you study these events, you are subject to reading the news articles in newspapers from suspected and confirmed white supremacist publications, and they leave out or put in whatever they want to put in. But I found a couple of inconsistencies about Mrs. Stevenson, Gladys Stevenson, and James Stevenson that I think are important for us to understand, for us to fully grasp what actually was taking place. Now, in 1946, was it common for black folks to fight back? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. In 1946, 1936, 1926, 1916, 1906, 1896, 1886, black folk had a legacy of fighting back. That is why one of the first things implemented post-Emancipation Proclamation, post-Civil War, post-Black Union Army soldiers was, we gotta disarm the blacks. White folks in the North and white folks in the South, all they could talk about is these blacks who done put in work in war. Matter of fact, they saved the Union, and the Union is what we call the United States of America today. There would be no United States of America today as we know it without the Black American Union soldiers putting in that work. We must understand that. We will analyze that here on P.A.R. Radio. Let's move on. I'm digressing. So there's always been this disarm the blacks. Who got the guns? Where's their guns? They don't need no guns. No guns for Negroes. Matter of fact, the NRA was formed to make sure that whites were armed and blacks weren't. NRA ain't never had no doggone concern about Black American citizens being able to practice their Second Amendment rights, the right to bear arms. You understand me? And nowadays they get all these mascot blacks to advertise and to spew propaganda to Black Americans today who are kind of confused and uninformed on the system of racism, white supremacy, and their relation to it. We do a lot of things out of confusion that are not constructive and that do not assist us in our number one priority. And that priority worldwide for people who are classified as black is to replace the system of racism, white supremacy with a system of justice. Period. You understand me? Now, I mentioned the details because Emory University Associate Professor of African American Studies, Carol Anderson, colorfully explained the event of the 1946 Columbia Race Riot in Tennessee. But there were some small details that I think here on P.A.R. are extremely important, and they will assist us in creating less confusion. Now, I got an article from TennesseeEncyclopedia.net. I am not going to read the entire article. I'm just going to read the first 3 paragraphs that will, in my opinion, alleviate some confusion. Now, take in mind this is a white publication and I'm reading it with suspicion, and I will try to chime in outside of what I'm reading to decodify the words that are being used in this publication. So it begins on February 25, 1946. James Stevenson, a U.S. Navy veteran from the Pacific Theater, accompanied his mother, Gladys Stevenson, to a local department store to pick up a radio that Mrs. Stevenson had left for repairs. She and a young white male clerk began to argue about the repair order. He became verbally aggressive, threatening her. James Stevenson, her son, stepped between the two and struggled with the clerk. Now that kind of differs from the professor Carol Anderson. She said that the man was disrespecting the man's mom. He took his mom, was taken out of the store, and the clerk hit him in the back of the head. But again, you have to understand, when you are studying these events, you are subject to contradicting documents on what actually happened. So we just got to do the best that we can. We know somebody, there was a scuffle. You understand me? So James Stevenson stepped between the two and struggled with the clerk, who ended up crashing through a window in a department store. Local police arrested both Stevensons for disturbing the peace. They pleaded guilty and paid a $50 fine. Now let me explain something to you. That man disrespected James Stevenson's mom, the white clerk, and James Stevenson gave him that word. Wasn't nothing special about it. You talking to my mama crazy? Go on and get some of these paws put on you, then threw him through the department store window. That ain't no coward. You understand me? He was getting some compensatory emergency action right there. He had to check this chump who talking to his mama crazy on some white supremacist tip. Nobody care about no white supremacy, even in the 1946. But you wouldn't know that. You didn't know that there was a warrior class within the Black American community, because all we hear about is the aftermath. After the cavalry has came, and I'm going to explain to you what I mean by the cavalry. You understand me? So, the second paragraph read, the incident was seemingly over until on the same day the police again arrested James Stevenson, the one who put them paws on that white dude in the store. This time due to a warrant brought by the white clerk's father. The new warrant charged Stevenson with assault with the intent to commit murder, a felony. Here we go. Here go that mess. Julius Blair, check me out now. I'm gonna say his name one more again. Julius Blair, a local black businessman, posted bond. However, and Stevenson was able to return home that evening. Now, let me explain something to you before I move on. Word was mumbling around the white community. Man, this black dude done put something on such and such at the store. So a white politician came in, a white person of influence. Somebody white was like, man, these Negroes, they get a little bit too uppity. We got to strain this one up so that these other Negroes won't just think they can come on our side of town and give us that work. It stops here. So they rearrested Stevenson. Then a connected businessman on the black side of town, which is called the Mink Slide and or the Bottoms. Again, the black side of town, which had black businesses, you know what I'm saying? Whatever you need for a community, they had there black-owned businesses as well as the black-owned economy. So Julius Blair, the so-called black businessman, could have been a legitimate businessman who just had businesses and wealth built and influence, or he could have been somebody from the under economy, you know, moving moonshine and numbers running. You know, white folks came down for not only to the listen to me now. White folks came to the black communities or the black side of town, and in this case, in Columbia, Tennessee, the Mink Slide and or the Bottoms, they came down there for all the slumming, prostitutions, drugs, alcohol, the music, and or the numbers running. I mean, it all goes down on the black side of town. You understand me saying? Everything, the lower frequency activity. White folks always down there up in that mess. So these under economy men would build, they would become wealthy, especially off that numbers running. And Lord knows what else they had going on, street boxing and all that old stuff. You got to use your logic and your imagination, because you're not going to get told this stuff, how these black people moving and how they got money. Because the way I was taught in school, we didn't have nothing. We just run around begging, dusty, and begging for whatever white folk wanted to give us, any type of crumb off their table. No, man. We had stuff popping. We always have stuff popping. But then it gets taken away. It gets sabotaged. It gets thwarted by the system of racism, white supremacy, not by one single white person that was like Bull Connors. Oh, he was no. A system. Follow me. Because the third paragraph goes, you know what? I'm not even gonna go into the third paragraph because you get the gist. So once Julius Blair bailed out Mr. Stevenson, James Stevenson, the veteran, from being accused of attempted murder for whooping some white dude behind on the white side of town at the store while he was disrespecting his mom. Once he bailed him out the second time, everybody knew, man, it's code red. Let's go back to the crib. Let's set up shop because the crackers is coming. The white folks is coming. The white supremacists is coming. You understand what I'm saying? They talking about coming over here, getting some straightening and stringing anybody up who wants to defend James Stevenson. And you had a group of warrior class black men and black women going into code red, going into the drill, getting on top of buildings, getting their shotguns, getting their pistols, getting their rifles, and was ready to get one or the other. Liberty or death. And in this exchange, first the mob came over, as the professor said. First the mob came over, they got a couple of bullets. The mob then turned around, tried to get the police. The police got a couple of bullets. Now, here is the thing. What does it mean to be white? What does white classification mean? Because these people had no justification to go into the black side of the community and try to get some vigilante justice for some white boy getting his behind whooped for disrespecting a woman. You understand what I'm saying? Disrespecting somebody, mama. What do you think gonna happen? Somebody just gonna sit there and let you do that? He got the work that he deserved. You understand me? But because they understand what it meant to be white. White doesn't mean that I'm better than you. White doesn't mean that I can whip you. No. White means I'm supreme to you because you're not white. Meaning, I can tell you what to do and you can't tell me what to do. Now, what do you mean, JohnGHorse? You trying to say white folks is better than me? No, what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, the perfect example is the 1946 Columbia, Tennessee Race Riot. Black men and black women defended themselves honorably against the white mob. They defended themselves honorably against the corrupt police department that then tried to come over there. But guess what happened? As Professor Carol Anderson said, the State Guard was called. Now, when the State Guard came, they came with high performance military weapons. Okay, these are veterans. We can go toe to toe with the local whites. We can go to toe with the corrupt police department. Now, when you're sending the State Guard over with Gatling guns and machine guns, here go the white flag. And there were 25 brothers, from my understanding, that said, hey, we'll say that we did it, get everybody into the safe the safe zone, and we just gonna go on and let them take us in, and we gonna take this death. But I tell you what, they're gonna think twice before they come again, because they're gonna have to worry about counter racist violence, because we're not having it. You understand me? Now, in the case of the race riots of Columbia, Tennessee, these 25 men, from my understanding, got the legal counsel. They were refused legal counsel, then they got the legal counsel of this star-studded NAACP attorney, which was Thurgood Marshall, who eventually became the first black Supreme Court justice in the United States of America. And after getting all those men free, because he had the connections, that NAACP, I don't agree a lot about it, but you got to understand it's a white institution, and that white institution had influence in the political realm. And this was one of the cases where this guy, Thurgood Marshall, was part of the NAACP, came down, and he got all of the men that were classified as black that were accused of attempted murder because they shot local mob the local lynch mob. They shot the white police officers, and they were all so-called set free now. But I do understand that once all of this happened, I highly suspect that a lot of those Jim Crow laws really tightened up. Probably people got pushed out of Columbia, Tennessee. Racial dislocation. We know how that goes. But this is just another case of what does it mean to be white. The black community rose up and fought against the white supremacists. But unlike white people, there ain't no cavalry coming to save us. And I hope that this presentation has given you one more example than you had before of the myth of Black American cowardice. I'm going to let Neely Fuller Jr. bring us on home with the cavalry ain't coming for you. The cavalry coming for the white supremacists. Cue the clear.
I say what I always say, you have the system of white supremacy, and it's a prison system. In a prison system, if you're a prisoner of war, all right, that's pretty serious stuff. All right, that's not what they call a civil prison. We are prisoners of war, okay? So you expect to get shot at any time that anybody comes around, particularly a white person with a gun, expect to get killed.
Even in your own home?
You don't have a home. You've got a jail cell.
Okay.
Okay? There's no such thing as a home for black people under the system of white supremacy. That says so in the code book. You don't have a home. What we call our home. That's just a place where the white supremacists allow us to go. That's just a resettlement place. That's all that is. A jail cell. All right? And we're in a jail cell regardless of where we go anyway. So just because we have a roof and 4 walls, that's not ours. Because we belong to the white supremacists. So if you belong to a set of people, who have captured you, you're in captivity, you've never been released, all right? You've never been compensated, you've never been put on your own 2 feet where you can stand up to anybody, okay? So if they decide to kick down their door, they put up the door, they allowed me to be behind the door, and in the 4 walls with a roof and a floor, okay? So if they come in there and they kill the Negro, that's all. And we should expect that at any time, anywhere. Stop thinking that we have some type of freedom. It doesn't exist. We are in a prison. We've never been outside that prison. Never. Not for 1 second. And if black people can just get that in our heads, what does that mean? What do you do about it? You be cautious, and to the nth degree. Painfully. When somebody comes up to that prison cell, armed, okay, gun pointing at you, expect to be dead. Or if you're out in the prison yard, which they let you be, in other words, walk up and down their streets and all like that. These are their streets. You don't have any community, any neighborhood. That thing called black community or black nations, that doesn't exist. You're in the system of white supremacy, and there is no other system. So anytime they walk in, particularly when they have something lethal pointed at you, you are completely vulnerable, and you have nobody to help you. All the other black people can do all this talking they want to, and they should. They should speak up, all right? But when they speak up, it's up to the white supremacists. It's up to the prison masters to say, well, how many of you people am I going to kill this year? Because there ain't nothing you can do about it. You don't know anybody that can help you do anything about it. And if you do, name them. All right? We got to get that in our heads as individuals. There is nobody coming to your rescue. You don't have a cavalry anywhere, all right? You have the complete mercy of the white supremacists in their world.
There is no cavalry coming for people who are classified as black. Yes, indeed, there is no cavalry coming for people who are classified as black, but the cavalry is coming for people who are classified as white or who classify themselves as white. Now, under that context, if there is confrontation between people who are classified as black and people who classify themselves as white, and we know the cavalry is coming for people who are classified as white, who in the hell are the cowards then? You understand me? Neely Fuller Jr., straight no chaser, balls. I hope I have contributed to less confusion. And remember, keep learning and stay codified.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
If you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. Confuse you.
My definition of white supremacy and racism, I use those two terms as synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.